Coming up, she is a monster, essentially invisible, undetectable to anyone.
Pilot, prepare to dive.
It's like an aircraft going into a dive.
Feel that pull? No, I really feel like I'm underwater.
This is the most capable submarine in the world. We could stay down here for months if we needed to.
That's the primary factor that means that we'll be able to win the war.
$360 billion is an extraordinary sum, and what we should be receiving is an extraordinary justification.
This is worth every cent. We need to have this capability.
Hello and welcome to the 60 Minutes podcast, Extra Minutes. I'm Amelia Adams and I'm joined today by our wonderful producer, Natalie Clancy. Welcome.
Thank you,
Welcome
Amelia.
back, I should say.
Thank you.
We're here today to discuss AUKUS, of course, the trilateral defence pact between Australia, the US and the UK to build and buy and supply Australia with nuclear submarines.
Or as we like to call it, subclub.
Yes, the subclub. And we're sort of part of the subclub.
We are, yeah.
Because we had such a rare and a really privileged experience in 2023 to go on board one of America's Virginia-class attack submarines. And we should start by pointing out it was so much work and hustle to get on board one of these machines. In fact, I think it's pretty unprecedented. The US Navy just do not let television crews on their top secret war machines, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And it wasn't just us. I think there were a few people in our team who'd been trying for a long time to get the kind of access we'd need to be able to show people in Australia what we're buying, essentially. But I think the people in the Navy who ended up giving us permission could see the point of the story and why it was important. And so eventually we got there. A few false starts with high tides, and we became experts in wave heights and all sorts of things.
Yeah, we did. And
but we got there.
It is more than $300 billion, the price tag on this deal. So to show Australians, our viewers, where that money's going, I think, as you say, was really important. And the US Navy eventually, after a lot of pushing and harassing, as we tend to do.
I think too, they are also really proud of what they've got, as they should be.
Yeah.
So I think part of it, once they got to the point where we were all on the same page about the purpose, they were quite happy to be really cooperative.
And once the Pentagon had signed off on it, Pentagon approval.
Yeah.
And they don't normally board civilians at sea otherwise as well. It was a first for them. What was your first impression as we approached? We were off the coast, somewhere off the coast of Queensland, and we approached the USS North Carolina.
I was just thinking about this last night, and it went back to that. We were in a car park at like a marina, and we were all popping seasickness tablets in the boot, trying to work out whether or not we should drink coffee.
We were so nervous.
Because we just did not want to get sick and ruin the experience.
And we didn't know how long we'd be on the charter boat.
Exactly.
To get out there, and how long it would take hours. We knew it would take hours, which it did, but we didn't know how many hours or what the process was going to be.
I remember too, they had told us that we would board a bit like a ferry, where there'd be a bridge from our boat to the top of the submarine.
That did not happen.
No, as we approached, what did we see hanging off the submarine?
This was my best memory was approaching, and there was one of the crew, well, there was about, 5 or 6 crew on top waiting for us. One of them was wearing flippers and holding like a broom handle, like a long pole.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow.
And there's a rope hanging off the edge, a rope ladder.
A rope ladder. And the biggest and the best underwater predator that the US Navy has. And this is how we're getting on board.
And I remember just turning to one of the Navy personnel we had with us and saying to him, what's the rope for? Well, what's the ladder for?
Yeah.
And he said, oh, that's how you're getting on.
That's it.
And we all looked at each other like, okay.
So we did get on, and it was pretty choppy, but we made our way up. And
what did you think of that little climb up the top? You went last.
Yeah.
Because we had to film you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was pretty choppy. It was a big waves, and I kind of just thought we just got to get on there. Just
grab the broom handle.
Grab the broom handle and jump. I just didn't want to be that person that went over and had to be rescued, and what a start that would have been.
I know. I remember too, I went ahead of you and the cameraman with the sound recordist, Matt Brown.
Yes.
And we're in the little boat approaching. So we'd left the boat where all of us were.
Yeah.
We're approaching the submarine, and Matt's looking at me going, do you want to go first? And I'm thinking, not really. And he knew, and he goes, okay, I'll go first.
Yeah.
So bless Matt.
Yeah.
Off he went. And then once I'd seen that he'd done it, I was like, we'll be okay.
We're good here.
Yeah.
It was such an experience, I think, for us and for them.
Yes.
They're just like, what is this television crew?
Totally.
And what are they going to be filming? But they were so welcoming. And once we got on board, they're about 130 crew. And I mean, they live in the most extraordinary conditions. Like the
Insane.
maze, under that hatch.
And just the lack of personal space that you have in that
Yes.
environment too.
Yeah.
But it seemed very, I'm sure everyone has their moments, but it seemed quite harmonious. And they were all quite driven by like the reason they were there. And
Well, I think as we learned, it takes a certain type of person to be a submariner or a
Yes.
submariner,
As they say.
however you say it,
Yeah.
American or Australian.
yeah,
And they do say that. I mean, it really does take a specific personality type. You have to be able to really work under pressure. They work those 24-hour shifts. Or,
Yes.
there's no day, there's no night. And as we discovered, which was really the reason that we were on board, was to find out why these machines are so critical for Australia's future, I guess, in terms of defence and national security, which is because they can be submerged for months. So you've got to be able to be a person, and I couldn't do it,
I couldn't do it either.
who could be underwater, undetectable for months.
And uncontactable.
And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And interesting the way they use the space.
Yes.
Every little, like, you'd see a pipe and then you'd see a little cupboard, and like it was every nook
Tea
and
bags
cranny
in
had,
there
like,
or
a tin of food or just shoved everywhere because they don't know when they'll be coming up again.
The other thing that surprised me, but maybe it shouldn't have, was that they all seemed to prefer being underwater.
Yes.
So you could sort of feel the difference when the submarine was on the surface or when it was
Yeah.
in the deep.
Yeah.
And that was their preference.
Yeah.
And even I remember some of them saying, oh, I sleep better here than I do in my own bed at home.
Which is so strange to me
Yeah.
because, and leads to my next question. What was your low light?
My low light. Look, to be honest, there are no low lights. It was all
What was your
amazing.
greatest challenge?
The greatest challenge was just getting into the bed.
Yeah, it was sleeping for sure.
Yeah. We had a 3-bunk room. And I
Would
I
we
had
call it
them-
a room?
No, broom
It
cupboard
was more
maybe.
like shelves.
Shelves, exactly.
So
3
top,
shelves.
middle, bottom.
And it just trying to maneuver your body
Yeah.
to get into I was in the middle shelf with like no space on this side.
And I was on the
quite a
bottom, and I felt like I had to lie on the floor and kind of roll myself like a bug, or like, I don't know what the analogy is, but it was vastly unladylike.
Yes. But I think too, like, as funny as it is, it makes you have like a greater respect for the people who do that kind of
Absolutely.
work
Yeah.
because none of that matters to them.
No.
Because they're so motivated by their duty,
Yeah.
you know? And that's like really quite amazing.
And we saw that at play. We saw them do drills. I mean, their activities, and some of them they were doing no doubt for the benefit of showing us and showing
Yes.
our cameras. But some of them are, what they do regularly, daily. Sometimes they know they're coming. Sometimes they're completely spontaneous. And that's the nature of preparedness, as they say, like
Yeah.
being absolutely ready for any situation at any time. And I found that really fascinating.
Me too.
Like they're always on, or they
Always
have to be able to be always on.
Yeah. And what about when we went up to the highest point on the submarine above the ocean?
amazing.
What was that like for
Yeah.
you climbing up?
That was extraordinary. So that was before we dove.
Yes.
Wasn't it?
Yes.
That's right. That
It
was,
was
the
pretty
first
much
day.
pretty quickly after we got on.
Yeah. I just found that really overwhelming, climbing up and the view, if you can call it that. I mean, I just couldn't stop looking at the horizon. And then when you turn around and this enormous, I actually can't remember the dimensions now,
I can't either.
absolute monster
Yeah.
of a machine, and the waves sort of lapping on it.
And just seeing nothing in the distance.
Yeah. So that was my highlight.
Yeah.
My, let's not call it low light, as you say,
Biggest
my greatest challenge was the sleeping.
Yeah.
Or not, we didn't really sleep.
I was going to say, we just didn't really sleep, which is fine for one night.
But the highlight was definitely that view. And the captain came up with me and we had a really interesting chat. And I love yes, they know they're on camera and in a sense they're pitching their machine, but they genuinely, you can tell it's genuine.
Absolutely.
They
And he
have
was fantastic.
you have to love that job.
Yeah.
And you have to believe in it. Otherwise, you're not going to go out to sea
No.
for months on end and live under such pressure away from your family.
That's right.
And I remember him saying to me, "You got a good deal here, ma'am."
Yes.
I was like, "Why? Why are we spending
Like you were
300
buying something on the
billion?"
weekend. You
That's
got a
it.
good deal.
Got
Yeah.
a good deal here. Diving was pretty, it wasn't terrifying. It was just really uncomfortable for me.
And it was unpredictable. I was about to say like a momentary highlight.
Yes.
Was when we heard one of them say, prepare to dive.
Well, which I initially thought was prepare to die.
Me too. And we just looked at each other.
So that was not a great moment. But then we realised it was prepare to dive. We're like, oh, wow, we're going to dive.
Yeah.
Pilot, prepare to dive.
Prepare to dive. Prepare to dive. Prepare to dive.
Trying to stay cool as well, because these guys are
Yeah.
it's so serious and so important what they're doing. And for us, it was just like, oh my goodness, I can't believe we're about to dive.
You can't believe it's happening.
Nuclear submarine.
Yeah.
Who gets to do that? Unless you're in the Navy. Yeah. And even then, those subs they're such coveted roles to work on and live on. So then we did dive, and it was just this strange sort of finding your balance. And remember in the officers' mess, you saw like the coffee cups and things.
Yes.
Everything has to be tied down, because it does happen pretty quickly and pretty steeply.
And we shouldn't forget too that we had another camera crew, Luke and Chick,
Yes.
who stayed on the boat
Yeah.
and followed the submarine.
Yeah, they stayed on a charter boat.
Yeah.
For hours and
Just
hours
heading
and
further
hours.
and further
Yeah.
and further out to sea.
So they could get those incredible shots from a distance, and also the drone vision.
and just to capture the moment when it goes underwater.
Yeah, and I think, that was so important in our story.
Yeah.
Just for everyone to be able to visualise, I guess, the size and the extraordinary kind of monstrosity that it is, but then also, as you say, submerging, and the fact that it is like, you can see from the drone it goes under, and then you just
Undetectable, untraceable.
completely, which is the whole point.
Yeah.
And the captain wouldn't give us there are a lot of things on that sub which obviously are top secret and remain top secret.
Yes.
No
No matter how hard we tried.
I know we tried. We certainly tried. But just to get a sense of how they, I guess, not only survive but really thrive under there, because they're a happy crew.
It was a happy crew.
And I mean, people might be surprised to know that we had like a pizza night.
I was about to say the same thing.
Yeah. So it was, and that's a regular thing they do on board. They put on a movie in the captain's mess, homemade pizza.
Yeah, fresh
delicious.
dough. That was one of the other things that I didn't really know beforehand, was that apparently the submarines have some of the best food in the Navy because so much of it has to be fresh because they can't store frozen food. So they made fresh cookies, I remember.
Yeah,
they made the
food,
pizzas.
Like genuinely, the food is fantastic. And you and I have been on other naval ships and vessels together when the food is not fantastic.
Yes.
And part of that also is to keep morale high.
Totally.
Because the living conditions are so difficult, they really focus on churning out good meals. So even when they run out of fresh stuff, they use frozen stuff, they use canned stuff. But remember the captain and the chef saying as well, like, it has to be stuff that these guys will look forward to. These guys and girls will, because we all know a good meal can boost morale. And to that point, the most surprising thing on board,
what was it?
the ice cream maker.
Oh, of course.
The soft serve machine
course.
was it in the crew mess?
Yeah, it was.
Like, is this a soft serve machine? They're like, yeah, no, it is. And then the chef explained that he makes a different flavour every day.
And we almost thought it was a joke, like it was a top secret machine dressed up as an ice cream machine.
Yeah, this is some sort of machinery.
wasn't.
But genuinely, like, I mean, I guess it's a great way to boost morale.
Totally. And they all seem to love it.
Yeah.
What about getting off?
Yeah, getting off was tricky. I think we were so exhausted by then, and you were a bit seasick.
I was a little bit under the weather in the morning.
We had, this is not the naval term, but we had come up. We'd gone up. We had ascended out of the water.
We were surfacing.
We'd surfaced, thank you.
We'd surfaced.
Oh, they'll never ask me back. We had surfaced, and it had been a long 30 hours or so.
And it was choppy.
And it was really choppy to the point where they were saying we may not be able to disembark you, which was a little concerning.
Guam.
Yeah. So for a time there, we thought we might be taking a short detour. And, there's always great stories to be told in Guam.
Absolutely.
So we were workshopping some of those.
And they were very accommodating.
But
I remember getting to the bottom of, again, not the right naval term, but the hole we were going to climb out
yes.
of. A giant ladder hangs down through the submarine.
Oh my God.
And you and I are standing at the bottom. And there's just water teeming in, like waves crashing over the top.
We can't climb up that.
And we're going, are we going to get out? Are we going to get wet?
Then we had to wait till that, basically in time with the waves.
Yeah.
And then the crew member up the top would be like, up, come up now, and scramble up the ladder. And then the next wave would go down and the next one of us would go up, and getting off. And I think you see this at the end of the story. Getting off was pretty hairy. Like the waves were huge and it took a long time.
And they were smashing over
Yes.
the top of the submarine
Yeah.
as well. So
Yeah.
just being so conscious not
They
to
were
sleep.
nervous. I mean, it's, their responsibility to keep everyone safe. But,
The one thing is, though, I felt so safe.
well, that's it.
Even getting off,
the
I was
best
like,
of the best.
even
looking
though
after
it
us.
had only been one night,
Yeah.
you have like a bond to these people. And it's like,
I know.
like the chief,
They
remember
were
the chief of the
amazing.
boat?
Yeah, chief of boat. He was incredible.
He was up there and he grabbed onto our hands
Yep.
as we got off.
Yep.
And I was just like, there's no way he's letting me go.
No, they
I'll
did
be
so
fine.
well. One part we skipped, the weapons room.
Yes.
So down the bottom, where a lot of the crew sleep,
about to say
literally
doubles.
like in sardine shelves alongside torpedoes. That was crazy. And that's another obviously defining feature of these submarines, their ability to launch torpedoes so quickly. And remember the weapons officer
Yes.
had the keys to the torpedo
Yes.
on his little Mario Kart.
I was about to say the Mario
He
Kart
pulled
key.
it out and he was like, and this is I'm like, wow, this is the guy who holds all the power.
And I think it goes to the point you made earlier about how these people are always on.
Yeah.
And so no matter what he's doing, whether he's on shift, off shift, wherever he is on that boat, he's got the keys and he's ready at a moment's notice to go and I think they said it was like turning up.
That's right.
Start turning up
Yeah.
to respond.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. So I think, felt very much that these are extremely cool submarines.
Yes.
And we could see, or at least try to tell the story of why the investment's been made.
Yeah.
Obviously, since we were on board, there's been a lot of developments in terms of different bits of legislation through Congress, because this whole deal really depends on US Congress approving all the various bits and pieces that will go into the delivery of it. And we now have a new US administration. So let's delve into that a little bit. I think one of the key concerns is that Donald Trump is unpredictable.
Yes.
And you read a lot of commentary and hear a lot of people saying, oh, he'll rip up AUKUS.
What have you heard about that?
I think
fear?
that's unlikely. He is unpredictable. He is isolationist in a way. He's America first. And, that's another red flag we should talk about in the moment in terms of America not meeting its own production
Yes.
targets. So I think while he'll prioritise that, he loves a good deal, doesn't he?
That's right. And if he can be convinced it's a good deal,
Yeah.
maybe we'll be okay.
And I do think as well he likes to look strong on the world stage. There's not really any downfall for the US in this. The Indo-Pacific has become so important to them strategically. Comfortingly, his team that he's putting together, more broadly, it is a very interesting team. But in terms of foreign policy, I think there are some people in there who are quite strong on the Indo-Pacific. So that probably bodes well for Australia.
As you say, even if the Trump administration is super supportive of AUKUS, there's still a potential issue in terms of production.
Yeah, and even today, we've heard that the Biden administration's asked Congress for $8.8 billion to fix the shortfall in their own domestic production. So basically, they need to be producing 2 Virginia-class attack subs a year to meet their own
For their own Navy.
domestic target for the US Navy. And then, look at what they're going to produce, because we're supposedly buying 3 of theirs in the next few years, and then we'll be building 5 of our own in South Australia. At the moment, the US is producing 1.3 Virginia-class subs a year. So not meeting their own targets. And that's certainly a concern, because that's where you could see a Trump administration saying, well, America first.
If we don't have enough for ourselves, there's no way we have enough for Australia.
Yeah, and why would, a submarine rolling off the production line in Connecticut go to us if the US Navy needs it?
Speaking of Connecticut, just to backtrack slightly to our expedition on the submarine, you had the best comparison of all as to how advanced the Virginia class is, because you'd seen the first one ever, the Nautilus.
I did, that's right. And it's in dock, and it's been turned into really kind of like a museum, semi-submerged museum in Groton, Connecticut, which is the submarine making home base of America. And we went on board. And they've done it really well, actually. They've got dummies and mannequins of submariners doing their jobs and how they used to live. Some things are quite similar.
That's what's hilarious. Like life on board seems quite similar.
Yeah, it absolutely
The technology's
is.
better.
That's it. So that was really fascinating, the Nautilus. And we went to a production, a company in Connecticut, and there's a couple that make, all the little like nuts and bolts and screws and hardware and bits and bobs that will be going into submarines that will be coming to Australia, and they're all really excited about the prospect of building ships for us as well.
And so proud to share what they do.
So proud. And, it's the information and the technology, as we know that, in terms of the pillars of AUKUS, there's so much defence sharing that's being done. However, they will need some more money and a big hurry up if they're
going to deliver on time.
If they're going to deliver on the timeline. So that's kind of a bit of a wait and see. And I think there's a lot of speculation about what happens in 2025. And Donald Trump hasn't spoken specifically about AUKUS yet and his plans for it. But fair to say it is the Australian government's biggest or most important issue when it comes to the US alliance at the moment in terms of discussion. And
if the submarines aren't delivered on time, then Australia starts worrying about a gap, right, between when the old submarines have been phased out and they're waiting for the new ones to come in.
Yeah, and our Collins class are, they're done. They're ready to go. And we went on a Collins class as well.
We did, with the Defence Minister.
Yeah, with Richard Marles. That was fascinating as well. I'd never been on a Collins.
Me neither.
Very different, very different. And we were all swanning in we've just been on a Virginia class.
We were.
This old thing. But it was great to see the comparison and just to hear the Defence Minister's, thoughts on acquiring the new submarines, how critical it is, how the money's going to add up, because that's a huge job for his department, obviously, the finance behind it.
And I think too, by seeing the Collins class compared to the Virginia class, the case was quite clear as to why an upgrade would be beneficial.
Yeah.
As in, you could tell it was a much older piece of machinery. It has to surface so much more regularly.
Yeah.
It was no comparison, really.
Yeah, that's right. So I think there's a lot of unknowns.
Yeah.
In terms of whether or not the AUKUS timeline is deliverable. And obviously, politics and geopolitics will always come into play. But at this stage, we can say all three governments are very much committed to it and speaking positively about it. And if the US can sort out its own production figures, a Pentagon figure said today, our program and shipyards are not producing submarines at the rate our national security strategy and the defence strategy require. So that is concerning.
It's quite blunt too.
It is quite blunt. So watch this space, I suppose.
And as we continue to watch this space, looking back, what would be your lasting memory of your time on board?
I think definitely being up the top, looking out and it was one of those moments where I call it a 60 Minutes moments where I'm like, this is such a privilege to be here. It's one of those moments where you know that we're there because of the program that we work for, and we've gone to somewhere extraordinary with extraordinary people. The scientists and the physicists and all the people on that crew. And we've done that to show our audience something that most people would never get to experience. So I had that moment up the top.
Takes your breath away, really does.
Really did. And also with the wind and the waves, it was a very, all of the senses, all of the feelings.
Oh, yeah. And you can feel the force of it. Up there.
Yeah.
You can feel that it is a big machine.
Yeah, and there's the constant noise as well. So I found it quite overwhelming, and I felt very, very lucky to be telling that story.
Me too.
And because it's something that I'd been, invested in as a journalist since I remember the morning it was announced.
Yeah.
In the middle of the night, actually, I got the phone call because I was in America at the time for 9 News. From that moment in September 2021, I've been like, I'm going to get myself on one of those submarines.
And you did.
And who knows what happens with this security deal over the coming years. There's years to play out. We're hopefully getting them in the water in the 30s and then the 40s, which still seems like a long time away when you look at what's happening strategically with China. So, Maybe we'll get on another one day, Nat.
Maybe. I definitely have my hand high in the air.
What's your lasting impression?
I think my lasting impression, maybe as we were leaving and as we're back on the charter boat, driving away from the submarine, just thinking that there's that community of people, you know, in that confined space together for how many more months. And it's like its own little world down there.
It is.
You know, and we're only on board for one night, but you become so accustomed to their routine and their way of living.
Yeah.
And so it's driving away thinking, or not driving, but,
yeah,
you know, on the boat,
our
heading
life
away.
goes on.
Exactly. Thinking that machine is still turning.
That's so true. We have such intense time as the crew and the camera crew. We sort of live in each other's pockets.
Yeah.
But to think that they do that for months on end, and they're also some of the smartest, brightest, not saying that we're not, but, you know, minds that America can muster, and they're literally protecting the Indo-Pacific.
That's it.
It's pretty amazing.
It was amazing, yeah. And I think all of us who were involved came away thinking it was amazing.
Yeah.
And even with the politics and the budgets and all of that aside, you can't help but be impressed and have, I guess, a respect for the work they do and how proud they are of it.
Well said. It was a great experience. And if you haven't watched the story, I'd encourage you to go back and do that on YouTube or on 9 Now, because it was just a fantastic experience and such a journey, and you get to meet some of the brilliant crew that we spent time with. So that's it for today. Thank you, Nat.
Thank you, Amelia.
And we'll see you next time on Extra Minutes.